Assalamualaikum and a very good day to Madam Azlin. Today, our group will be presenting on why Jakarta city planning failed so badly. Before we start our presentation, let me introduce you to the team members. Alia Kristina, Nur Amisha, Amira Adlin, Shasha Adlina, Nurin Amni, Anis Raihana and Nurul Balkis.
I will start with the introduction. The chosen video looks at Jakarta, a megacity of around 10 million people, and asks why it's become one of the most congested cities in the world. Commuters can lose 3 to 4 hours a day stuck in gridlock. It's actually so severe that Indonesia has decided to move its entire capital city away from Jakarta just to escape the problem. The core transport issue here is that Jakarta's infrastructure planning simply couldn't keep up with the city's growth, and the numbers are pretty shocking. The gridlock is estimated to cost the economy 5 to 6.5 billion every year through wasted fuel, lost productivity, and health costs. On top of that, vehicle emissions make up around 70% of the city's air pollution. The video points to 3 root causes. First, decades of building roads and highways without proper planning, which just fill up with more traffic. Second, Jakarta didn't even have a metro line until 2019, way behind cities like Tokyo and Singapore. And third, unchecked urban sprawl. The wider metro area now has over 30 million people, but jobs are still centered in the city, forcing millions to commute long distance by car or motorbike every day. So, why does this matter for transport and logistic planning? Because Jakarta shows us what happens when you build infrastructure without a proper system-wide plan behind it. Even now, with their first MRT line running since 2019, the network is still considered just a skeleton. It's a clear example of why transport planning needs to work hand in hand with land use and long-term governance, not as isolated fixes.
An examination of Jakarta's transportation crisis reveals 3 interconnected structural issues, each compounding the others over several decades. The first issue is a road-first development strategy that produced induced demand. Throughout the latter half of the 20th century, Jakarta's urban planning prioritized private vehicle infrastructure, focusing heavily on highways, ring roads, and elevated flyovers. However, this approach fell victim to a well-documented economic phenomenon, induced demand. Each expansion in road capacity made driving more attractive, drawing additional vehicles onto the network and restoring congestion to previous levels within a short period of time. Rukmana 2018 argues that road expansion in Jakarta consistently fails to outpace vehicle ownership growth, since new infrastructure generates traffic that would not otherwise exist. Rukmana further contends that continued prioritization of road infrastructure over mass transit undermines the city's broader efforts to establish a viable public transportation system. The second issue is a prolonged absence of mass transit infrastructure. For decades, Jakarta remained an outlier among global megacities as one lacking a functional metro system, despite comparable cities such as Tokyo, Singapore, and Seoul investing substantially in rail networks. The Trans-Jakarta Bus Rapid Transit System, introduced in 2004, provided a necessary but insufficient alternative. Jakarta's first MRT line did not open until March 2019, and the resulting network remains, by most assessments, a skeletal system relative to the needs of metropolitan population exceeding 30 million. Dahlan and Frasix 2019 note that prior to the line's opening, there was no empirical evidence to suggest residents would shift away from private vehicles, reflecting the extent to which car-dependent behavior had become entrenched. The third issue is unchecked urban sprawl resulting in spatial mismatch. The Greater Jakarta region, Jabodetabek, has expanded substantially outward, with satellite cities such as Bogor, Depok, and Bekasi growing into dense urban centers. This growth, however, occurred without corresponding investment in transit-oriented development, producing a significant spatial mismatch between residential areas and employment centers concentrated in central Jakarta. Firman and Fahmi 2017 observed that Jakarta's share of the total Jabodetabek population declined sharply between 1990 and 2010 as residents relocated to peripheral areas, while employment opportunities remained centralized. This suburbanization occurred largely because of the absence of coordinated transit planning, leaving new residents structurally dependent on private transportation. Collectively, these three factors form a self-reinforcing cycle. Infrastructure decisions that generated their own demand, insufficient transit alternatives, and a spatial pattern of growth that made private vehicle use effectively unavoidable.
Assalamualaikum, my name is Amira Adlin and I will explain the critical analysis of Jakarta's traffic congestion by focusing on its main causes, stakeholders and impacts. The first cause is the road first policy. For many years, the government built more roads and highways instead of improving rail transport. This has encouraged more people to buy and use private vehicles, making traffic even worse. The second cause is urban sprawl and limited public transport. As more people moved to the suburbs, public transport did not expand fast enough. Because of this, many people had to rely on private cars and motorcycles for their daily commute. The final cause is poor coordination between authorities. Different government agencies are responsible for transport, making it difficult to plan and manage traffic effectively. This has delayed important policies to reduce congestion. Next are stakeholders. There are three main stakeholders affected by these issues. The first one is the Indonesian government, which is responsible for planning and implementing transport and land use policies. However, overlapping responsibilities and poor coordination have limited the effectiveness of these plans. The second stakeholder is daily commuters, who depend on reliable and affordable transport to travel to work and school. They are the group most directly affected by this congestion. The third stakeholders is foreign investors and domestic businesses, which rely on efficient transport and logistics to maintain productivity and to support their economic growth. Next are the impacts. The impacts are significant for all stakeholders. For the government, fragmented governance has resulted in costly infrastructure projects with limited improvements to mobility, leading to financial losses and declining public trust. For the commuters, traffic congestion means longer travel times, limited access to reliable public transport, and greater exposure to air pollution, which can negatively affect both of their health and quality of life. Finally, the businesses and investors may experience higher logistic and inventory costs due to unpredictable travel times and delayed deliveries. Overall, congestion is estimated to cost Jakarta between 5 to 6.5 billion US dollar every year, reducing the competitiveness of Indonesia's economy. In conclusion, Jakarta's congestion is not simply caused by too many vehicles. It is the result of long-term policy decisions, weak governance, and insufficient integration between transport planning and urban development. Thank you.
Next, I will present about the effectiveness of the Jakarta current transport strategy. Firstly, let's look at the success of the public transport development in Jakarta. The introduction of MRT Jakarta in 2019 was a major improvement for the city. It showed that people are willing to use public transport when the service is fast, reliable and convenient. The MRT reduced travel time from around 2 hours by road to only 30 minutes, making it a better option for the daily commuters. This success can be seen through the increase in passenger. MRT Jakarta recorded 46.4 million passengers in 2025, with the daily ridership increasing from 127,259 passengers to 150,302 passengers by June 2026. Besides MRT, Transjakarta also played an important role by serving more than 1.4 million passengers daily, while LRT recorded 28.8 million passengers in 2025. However, Jakarta transport strategy still faces several limitations. Although MRT and LRT has improved the mobility, their coverage is still limited and cannot fully solve congestion across Jabodetabek, which has around 30 million people. At the same time, private vehicle ownership continued to grow, reaching 25.07 million vehicles in 2025. This contributes to Jakarta congestion level of 59.8% and causes a commuter to lose around 125 hours every year due to the traffic delays. Another challenge is the weak first and last mile connectivity. In suburban areas such as Bekasi, Depok and Tangerang, only 16% of the residents have access to the transit station. causing many people to continue relying on private vehicles. Therefore, Jakarta needs a better connectivity, stronger vehicle control policies, and wider transit-oriented development. And next, move to the comparison with the best practices. Now let's compare Jakarta with the Tokyo and Singapore. Tokyo shows the importance of the rail-strong system. Tokyo has developed its rail network since the mid-20th century and now handles over 40 million rail journeys daily. Around 91% of the work commuters use rail, and the Garage Act helps control vehicle ownership by requiring proof of parking before buying a car. Meanwhile, Singapore focuses on controlling private vehicle growth. The COE system limits vehicle ownership through the quota system, while the ERP system charges a vehicle during the peak hour to reduce congestion and encourage public transport use. In conclusion, Jakarta has made a progress in improving public transport, but Tokyo and Singapore show that successful transport management requires both strong public transport system and effective policies to control private vehicle use.
Next, I will be covering two of our proposed solutions to Jakarta's traffic congestion, infrastructure development, and integrated land use and transport planning. Infrastructure development. So for our first solution, we are talking about infrastructure development. Road capacity has grown far slower than vehicle ownership, depending chronic congestion. Basically, the roads in Jakarta are not growing as fast as the number of cars and motorbikes, not growing as fast. That's why the traffic just keep getting worse every year. Prioritize mass transit expansion over new roads to avoid inducing further vehicle demands. Instead of building more roads, our solutions say we should focus on public transport instead, because if you build more roads, people will just buy more cars and then it's still congested. It doesn't really solve anything. Extend MRT and LRT lines into dense Jabodetabek corridors, Bogor, Depok, Tangerang, and Bekasi. We want to extend the MRT and LRT to areas like Bogor, Depok, Tangerang, and Bekasi because a lot of commuters come from these places every day to work in the city. Integrate park and ride feeder buses and pedestrian links to secure last mile access. It's not just about the train though, we also need park and ride feeder buses and safe walking path, because even if the train station is there, people still need an easy way to get from the station to their actual destination. Success hinges on the stable funding, disciplined project governance, and interagency coordination. Of course, for all this to actually work, we need stable funding, good project management, and different transport agencies need to work together properly. Otherwise, projects like this can get delayed or go over budget. So that's covered infrastructure. Now let's move on how Jakarta plans its land use alongside transport. Moving on to our second solution, integrated land use and transport planning. Uncoordinated growth has decoupled housing, jobs, and transit, forcing long cross-city commutes. The problem here is that Jakarta grew really fast, but without proper planning. So now houses, workplaces, and public transport are all scattered around, not connected properly. That's why people end up commuting really far just to get to work. Advanced transit-oriented development (TOD) with high density mixed-use zoning near station. Our solution is something called TOD or Transit-Oriented Development. Basically, it means building more houses, office, and shops close to MRT and LRT station, so people don't need to travel far. Draw on Japan Rail property model, linking station investment to surrounding development. We can actually learn from Japan for this one. In Japan, when they built a train station, they also developed the area around it at the same time, so it benefits both the train company and the community. Align zoning and infrastructure planning across Jabodetabek's fragmented jurisdictions. We also need the zoning, rules, and transport planning to be aligned across all the Jabodetabek's areas, not just Jakarta alone, since a lot of these areas are actually separate local governments. Coordinate cross-boundary governance to steer growth toward transit-served corridors. So basically, all these different local governments needs to coordinate it together so that future development actually happen near transit area, not scattered randomly like before.
Next, I will discuss the freight optimization strategies to improve the urban freight efficiency in Jakarta. So, Jakarta congestion problem is not only related to passenger travel but also the movement of goods. When a freight vehicle experience delays, it affects delivery time, increase logistic costs and reduce the overall efficiency. So, one approach is to manage freight movement by restricting truck access during peak hours and shifting deliveries to off-peak periods. So, by reducing the number of heavy vehicles during the busy hours, congestion can be reduced while freight activities can still continue at suitable times. And another strategy is encouraging the alternative freight methods such as freight on transit or FOT, which use existing railway network to transport goods. This can reduce the dependence on trucks and decrease the number of freight vehicles competing for road space. And small distribution centers near railway station can also support the system by allowing goods to be more transferred more efficiently. Besides that, logistic company can adopt smart logistic solutions such as AI-based route planning, night deliveries, and micro depots. This technology helps improve delivery efficiency, especially for last mile. Next, I will explain the policy reforms as a solution for managing Jakarta traffic congestion. So previously, Jakarta introduced several policies such as 3-in-1 carpool system and odd-even license plate restriction. However, this measure become less effective because people found ways to avoid the restriction. Therefore, one proposed solution is the implementation of electronic road pricing, also known as ERP. This system charges vehicles entering the highly congested areas during peak hours, which can discourage unnecessary private vehicles usage and encourage people to consider public transport alternative. However, the success of ERP depends on public acceptance. The government needs to improve public understanding by clearly explaining the benefits of ERP, such as reducing congestion and improve the traffic condition. In addition, ERP should not be implemented alone. It needs to be supported by reliable public transport service, including MRT, LRT, and bus system, so commuters have sustainable alternatives. And finally, a strong regulation and public engagement strategies are important to ensure that ERP can be implemented successfully and achieve long-term congestion reduction in Jakarta.
Lastly, for the reflection and conclusion, there are several important lessons that we learn from this documentary. Firstly, the documentary showed that building more roads alone cannot solve traffic congestion in long term. Jakarta's experience proved that transport planning should not only focus on road development but also consider public transport system, land use planning, and future travel demand. Besides that, strategic transport and logistic planning is important because transport decision can create long-term impact on the economy, environment, and society. A proper planning approach can improve accessibility to jobs, education, and service, while also supporting efficient movement of goods. This is important because congestion just not only affect commuter but also affect logistic activities and business operation. For the future transport improvement, the proposed recommendations such as expanding public transport network, improving first mile and last mile connection, implementing intelligent transport system (ITS), and optimized freight movement can help to create a better transport system in Jakarta. However, this solution needs proper coordination between authorities and effective implementation to achieve the expected outcomes. Overall, the main takeaway from this documentation is that Jakarta needs an integrated and long-term transport planning approach. By connecting public transport, land use, freight management, technology, and policies, Jakarta can move toward a more reliable, accessible, and sustainable transport system for both residents and businesses.